This morning we're going to pick up where we kind of left off last week. I guess I had more material than I thought I had, and that happens. That means the handout this morning, which is on Facebook, begins where, I thought we were going to be last week, but we weren't. But we'll continue with the wrong use of words, and then if we get far enough, we're going to talk about the restraint with words. Proverbs is very good about warning us that many words can be problematic. Have you ever just said that little bit too much that got you in trouble? If we'd kept our mouths shut, things would have been better. Well, Proverbs warns about that. I'm going to share one proverb with you, not so much for the study, but because it's one of my favorite ones. It's about words, but I don't know how to fit it into the lesson, but I think you need to hear it, okay? Proverbs 27:14. He who blesses his friend with a loud voice early in the morning, it will be counted as a curse to him. Now, I want you to see that because the Bible has a sense of humor. I think we chuckle at this one. If we get this one right, we smile. How many of you are good to talk to before you've had your first cup of coffee in the morning? Okay. You know what this one means then, right? Let's start. Turn to Proverbs 11:12. Proverbs 11:12. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. Now, some of you, I'm reading the ESV, some of you are going to say, despise maybe here, okay? And the Hebrew word is a word that means despise, but the context is a one in which words are being used. So how do you despise with words? Well, you belittle someone, right? You know, if we're despising our neighbor, is it going to come out in some way? Are you going to hold in your despising of this person and he'll never know? Or will it creep out? My guess is it's going to creep out. That it will, in fact, come out in words in some ways. And so this is a warning about that. The wise man doesn't do that. The wise person doesn't do that. Proverbs 14:21 uses the same word. Even here, the ESV will translate it as despise. Whoever despises his neighbor is a sinner, but blessed is he who is generous to the poor. So what I'm talking about is hurtful talk. Do we hear some hurtful talk in our culture right now? Okay. Politics doesn't help, does it? It does bring out even more of it. But I'm kind of amazed at what people will say on Facebook. By the way, remember when you post on Facebook, other people do see that, other Christians see that, and sometimes your preacher sees that. So be careful about what you post. When I was growing up, I suspect that maybe it's still said, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Is that statement true? Why do we say it? There is an element, I think, when it is said to a child or to someone that we're trying to get across, and what is the element? What is the nugget of truth we need to grasp? Okay, we don't have to believe it. It doesn't have to determine what we do, how we respond. but to say they're not hurtful is probably a mistake. And so one of the things I want to kind of warn us about is to realize that hurtful comments do matter. Cliff Notarius of the Catholic University and Howard Markman of the University of Denver did a study of newlyweds. And they did this study over the first decade of their marriage. And they found some subtle differences between these couples. Among couples who would ultimately stay together, 5 out of every 100 comments made about each other were put-downs. 5 out of 100, 5%. Among couples who would later split, 10 out of 100 comments were insults or put-downs. And you think, 5%, 10%? Not a big difference, is it? No. It seems like it's not that dissimilar. But the truth was, the gap magnified over the years. So couples began to go downhill. And this is what the study said. Hostile put-downs act as cancerous cells that, if unchecked, erode the relationship over time. Now, I don't think marriages should fall apart. I think we should be in marriage for life. But recognize that hurtful words in a marriage relationship matter. And we need to be very cautious about that. I think the same is true with children. You know, I've read some articles about things parents say to their children, and I'm horrified by some of that. And we need to be very careful about the words we use when raising children. If you tell a child that he's dumb, and that's all you ever say to him, you're a failure, there's probably going to be some problems along the way. And some of this kind of parenting probably comes from how the parent was parented. And unfortunately, we suffer the sins of the fathers and mothers in our lives. We may find ourselves doing things that we shouldn't be doing, but our parents did. But hurtful talk, I think, is something that we should concern ourselves with. It's one of those issues that brings up the hostility level that is in our culture. And I think we can see it going on around us, and we can see the need to check it. And as Christians, we need to be a breath of fresh air. We need to be different from the culture around us. And that has to do with the way we talk to other people. Next one, turn to Proverbs 6, 1 through 5. We're going to be dealing with rash vows or promises. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, have given your pledge for a stranger, if you are snared in the words of your mouth, caught in the words of your mouth, then do this, my son, and save yourself, for you have come into the hand of your neighbor. Go, hasten, and plead urgently with your neighbor. Give your eyes no sleep and your eyelids no slumber. Save yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Now, what's the situation here? Okay, you got a hand up and you got a mic coming.
Well, if you listen to Dave Ramsey, it would be debt that you owe this person.
Okay, we'll talk about debt in a minute. But this isn't your personal debt. This is you're taking on surety for someone else's debt, right? And it uses two different terms, neighbor and sojourner, okay? And the situation seems to be one in which your own finances that are at jeopardy because you've made this promise. And so the advice is, get out of this situation. Do whatever you need to do to free yourself so this doesn't hang over your head, or it doesn't come around to bite you so that you find yourself in trouble financially. Years ago, when we were young and new at Granville, Scott, the only phone number I had at the house was the church line, which meant the church line could ring at any time of the day or night. That eventually got changed, and I would not advise that for you. But it was in the middle of the night, and I had a man call me up and tell me a couple of things. One, he was a member of the church, and two, his son was in jail, and three, he wanted me to bail him out. And I was supposed to put $200 down. Hey, EJ, would I have been liable for more than putting $200 down? Potentially, how much could I have been liable for? So I could have been liable for $2,000 if he skipped bail. Okay. I didn't have the 200. Well, maybe I could have squeezed it some way. But when you're young and married, you don't have a lot of margin in your life. Has that been all of your experience? And I certainly didn't have $2,000. And I kindly said no to him. And I was thinking of this very passage when I did. And of course, he had words for me about my Christianity for not helping him out. But I reminded him that there were probably bail bondsmen open 24 hours a day that he could call and take care of this. Why was I supposed to put my family at risk in order to help someone I don't know whether, I don't know who they are. I don't know what this young man is in jail for, and it may be spending a night in jail was a good thing for him. That's always possible. I understand a father's heart to want to get your son out and, but he was probably asleep. I was the one who was awakened by the phone call. So there's story number one. Story number two, because I don't want us to be heartless. At my 50th high school anniversary, I sat across from a good friend named Bob, that we did a lot of things together. Now, we had very different kinds of backgrounds. My dad was a banker, and we had a very comfortable life. I didn't want anything. I was told I was going to college. That was a done deal, and I never had to worry about it, and all those sorts of things. Bob grew up on a tenant farm. Now, if you're living in the middle of an agricultural area, being a tenant farmer means you don't have a whole lot, okay? A migrant worker would be below you, but tenant farmer, that's on the economic scale. Tenant farmer is not very high up. And I had been in his house, and, his house was, it would keep the cold of Illinois winters away. But it was nothing much to speak about, right? I mean, it was a sound house, but it wasn't attractive in any way. And then his father left the family. And you can imagine, well, what does that do? And he immediately, as a high school student, had to work. And so at this 50th anniversary, he tells me this story. He needed a car. And he needed a car loan. And he saw my dad. And you know what? As a teenager in high school, with nothing to back up the loan with, he needed a co-signer. And my dad co-signed the loan for him. And he said, you know, that got me started in adult life. It meant a great deal. Now, what was the difference between me on the phone with the father wanting his son bailed out and my dad co-signing a loan? Was the difference that my dad could afford it, right? My dad was in a position that if Bob had defaulted on the loan, everything would have been fine. And I probably would never have known about it. I didn't know about the loan when I was a boy. So this is about promises that are rash or things we cannot totally fulfill. Now, since debt has already been brought up, let's go to Proverbs 22:26. Be not one of those who gives pledges. I'll give you a chance to get there. Who put up security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? Now, what's this bit about your bed being taken away? Okay, you're losing just about everything. Matter of fact, the law said that if you took a man's cloak during the day, you had to return it at night so he had something to cover himself with. So, excuse me. This is about debt. And I think we do need to be reminded about that, and I think we need to be reminded about that especially when we're dealing in the economy we're in. I was looking at, my wife has a department store credit card. She doesn't use it much. We pay it off when she does. But they were giving their new rates. And I can tell you interest rates on credit cards are going to go up. Have any of you seen that? The late fee on this credit card was $41. And I thought, back when I was a young man, $41 would have been extremely painful, and I would still feel pain if I were late, right? So rash vows or promises are things that we need to be cautious about. Turn to Proverbs 19:5. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who breathes out lies will not escape. Now, this is talking about testimony. So we're dealing with more of a courtroom setting, right? And this is a warning about not giving false testimony. Now, how do we know that the false witness will not escape punishment?
It's all a matter of timing. It might not be in this life, but it will definitely be in the
Okay.
next.
He might not have to give an account for it in this life, but he will have to give an account for it. Now, under the law, what was the punishment for false testimony? Anyone know? Well, I don't think it's a matter of Michigan state law, but he may know. He knew about bail bonds, so.
The ninth commandment. This is a direct statement about the ninth commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. That means we defend our neighbor. We speak well of him. We put the best picture on everything.
Okay. The punishment for false testimony is found in Deuteronomy 19, 16 through 21. I'm not going to read the whole section. I'm going to read the punishment. Your eye shall not pity. It shall be life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Now, the life for life, hand for hand sort of thing just means punishment needs to fit the crime. It doesn't mean they always took hands and eyes and teeth and all of that sort of stuff. It's called in the legal system lex talionis, the law of the tooth, and it just means punishment needs to fit the crime. But if you're testifying against someone and it's a serious crime, then you are to be punished seriously. Can you think of a famous case of false testimony in the Bible? I can think of two.
About Ananias and Sapphira.
Okay. Let's not go there. This is not testimony in a court, but they were lying to God. The first one I think about is Naboth, and that's in 1 Kings 21. Remember, Naboth had a vineyard, and Ahab, the king, who was the king of the northern kingdom in Samaria, wanted the vineyard, and Naboth refused. It was his heritage. He didn't want to sell. And Jezebel cooked up a plan. She arranged for him to be at a banquet, at a meal, and witnesses were accused him of blaspheming God, and he was put to death. So that lets you see the seriousness of false testimony, right? If someone does time for a crime they didn't commit because of a false witness, that's a serious matter. That's hard to undo those sorts of injustices. Matter of fact, let me read one more about the false witness. Proverbs 19:28. A worthless witness mocks at justice, and the mouth of the wicked devours iniquity. And this is just a reminder how serious false testimony is. The entire justice system depends on true, honest, faithful witnesses. And when that doesn't happen, then miscarriages of justice occur. And this is just a reminder of how society can go in the wrong direction. The other case of false testimony that I would think of is the trial of Jesus. I won't take the time to go there because I've got plenty of material for us to look at. But we can understand false testimony of how that is a very serious matter. Turn to Proverbs 20, verse 20. If one curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out in utter darkness. Now, what does this one suggest? What? Oh, no. What do you think is going to happen to the man? What I mean. What does it suggest is going to happen for the one who curses his parents?
Put to death.
What?
Put to death.
Well, put to death may be too strong a words, but he may have an untimely death, right? What was the punishment for cursing your father or mother under the law? What? Okay, I don't have enough of the text to know that it was stoning, but he shall be put to death is in Exodus 21:17. So this is giving us a situation in where is every time a person says something, are there witnesses that could bring you to trial? No. And yet, this passage is saying there can still be consequences for it. Why would cursing your parents, and let me put it up on the screen, why is that such a serious thing? Why does Scripture take these matters the way they do? Okay, it is about authority, right? And if you have a society where there's disrespect for authority, then you begin to have problems. So this is about respecting proper authority in the home, and then finally in society, within the religious institutions, all that sort of thing. Greg? What?
In Leviticus 9, or in Leviticus 9, or 20, excuse me, verse 9, it says, if anyone curses his father or mother, he must be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother, and his blood will be on his own head.
Okay. Yeah, that's what the law said. I don't know how well they did this one or not, but understand its purpose. And in that culture, the chances were not very likely that a child would curse their parents in that way. But see that authority is what's being dealt with here, and protecting authority. Okay, let's change gears and talk about restraint with words. Got a comment?
I do, thanks, Russ. I know you said you were just going to change gears, but the one about the
I can
parents,
go back.
that's a direct, the cursing parents, that's a direct violation of the fifth commandment. And, sometimes I think we, because of our teaching and being in a new and better, circumstances as Christians in doctrine, our kids sometimes don't even know what the Ten Commandments are. And I grew up having to memorize them and the meaning of each of them. But it's interesting that the fifth commandment is, they seem like a list of do's and don'ts, but they give us great comfort in knowing how we should act. And the fifth commandment is the only one listed in Exodus that actually has the positive associated with it. Mm-hmm. That you may live long in the land. In other words, there's reward for when your actions are righteous.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you bringing it back to the Ten Commandments. I do think we need to know what they are. I mean, we know that there's been a change in covenants, but 9 of them still stand completely strong, right? And when I was growing up, they were actually on my schoolroom wall. I know that's not going to be the case these days, but I do think we need to be reminded of these moral truths, these things that we need to respond to. Okay, restraint with words. Turn to Proverbs 18, verse 13. If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. Now, are you ever tempted to give an answer before you've listened to what the other person said? Not a comment?
Well, I'm going to read from the New Living Translation. Spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish.
Okay. Sometimes when we're listening to people, we're thinking about what we want to say next. And I've been told that sometimes preachers are worse at this than others, because we always have a sermon ready to give to someone. But we do need to listen, or we may not know what's the real problem. And by the way, as someone who's had to listen to problems through the years, I have found that oftentimes the problem someone starts with is not the problem they want to tell. the problem they start with is not the problem they want to tell. So you have to prove yourself that you've actually listened. Trying to respond without knowing what's being said is foolish. It doesn't accomplish much. Take a look at Proverbs 18:17. The one who states his case first seems right, until the other comes and examines him. Restraint with words is necessary in order to hear what the other person is saying. And there are many times when we will have heard things, and if we're not careful, we've not heard enough. Turn to Proverbs 12:16. Oh, these two that we're going to read next speak to our culture so much. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. Proverbs 29:11. A fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. I think we have some problems with anger management in our culture. What do you think? Restraint with words is necessary to allow anger or strong emotions to pass. When our son Brad graduated with his PhD, we were going to a dinner. We were going out to eat. And he was in a part of the town he didn't know very well, and he had to get into another lane. And maybe he cut off the other driver. I don't know whether he did or didn't. But we pulled into the parking lot of the restaurant, and this guy just followed him right in, and I'm standing there thinking, my son's going to get shot. He just got his PhD. He's going to get shot for a minor traffic thing. The guy vented his anger and went on, but I'm thinking, you know, if you were that concerned about your schedule, that you were cut off for a few seconds, why did you do that? But we're living in that kind of age where people are venting their anger in ways that are not appropriate. So restraint with words is necessary to allow allow that anger. I talked previously about the fight or flight mechanism that adrenaline brings about us. We all get those adrenaline rushes at times. And restraint with words are to allow that anger or those strong emotions to pass. Turn to Proverbs 15:28. Restraint with words gives the wise time to think about what to say and how to say it, is the point. Proverbs 15:28 reads, "The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things." Do you ever just need a time to know how to answer something? Dave?
My problem was always, and the problem with all of us who wear hearing aids, they don't restore your normal hearing.
Okay.
And I've made comments where I see a strange look on their face. I know I didn't hear everything before I commented, and I commented on the wrong thing, as you know. And so if I or somebody's wearing hearing aids makes a comment that doesn't go along with what you said, just say it again.
Okay.
We want to hear,
Yeah,
but
that's-
we don't restore your normal hearing.
Yeah. We'll make allowances for hearing aids.
And that's why this microphone is so important, is because we have people that are struggling with that, and so trying my best to get the mic to you guys, so thanks.
Besides, the online people can't hear without it.
Absolutely,
That's
yes.
true too. I know sometimes the first thing that would come to my mind in words would not be the thing to say. When I was a young man, I had a bit of a sharp tongue. I could be witty, but I could be witty with cutting, you know? And I trained myself not to do that. I began to realize what I was doing. And I changed in college. I stopped doing that. I still like to say funny things, but I try not for them to be hurtful things. So restraint gives you time to think. Is this the thing that should be said or not?
It just reminds me of what James said in the New Testament, be swift to hear and slow to speak and slow to anger.
Okay. James is one who, there's a lot of proverbial-like things in James. There's certainly a lot of things similar to the prophets in James, and a whole lot that sounds just like Jesus in James. And that's, that's just one of them. Anybody else on this one? Turn to Proverbs 10:19. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. Take a look at Proverbs 21:23. Whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. So, what's the point? Restraint with words helps the wise to avoid sin. Do you find this true in your life? Yeah. Okay, got a hand up.
I'm going to throw out some heresy here. There have been times, and I have regretted them enormously, when I showed restraint and somebody didn't get the lesson they needed to get. I don't mean being, throwing out and calling them names or anything like that, but I mean that I observed something where they were in error.
Okay.
But I kept it in because I wasn't sure that I was in a place, because it irritated me. Mm-hmm. And while I was thinking it over, the moment passed. And so there's always the temptation, trying to, you say all this stuff about being silent is wise, and I agree with it, but there do come times when you need to speak, and I can see where you can go too far the other way.
Okay. And what did we say about Proverbs in the beginning of our study? There are general truths.
How about a proverb, a timely word fitly spoken is like apples and silver, or something along those lines?
Okay. But Proverbs also talks about giving correction. And I think I want to still talk about positive uses of words. We've talked about the negative uses. But giving correction at the right time is also important. So yeah, there's a balance that needs to be met. And some of it may be the situation, the kind of person it is. It's that do not answer a fool according to his folly, or answer a fool according to his folly sort of situations. So yeah, I've had the same experience where maybe I should have said a word and I didn't. So restraint is not the only answer Proverbs is giving, but it's one of the answers. And it helps us to have time to hear. It helps us to have time to get control of our anger. It helps us to have time to think, and it helps us to avoid sin. Anybody else have a closing comment? Kurt, it's so good to see you.
Well, it rings in my ear about Revelation 21:8 and how it puts words in the same state of mind as murderers, adulterers, and so forth. I'll read 21:8. But as for the cowards, the unbelieving, the abominable, the murderers, the sorcerers, and the idolaters who practice and teach these false religions, and all of the liars who knowingly deceive and twist words, their part will be in the lake of fire and brimstone. And isn't it just what you're bringing this up about words? It's such a, as the old adage goes, a sin is a sin is a sin. It doesn't really matter what the sin is. And these words, like you've been talking about this morning, words can lose your soul.
Okay.
And I just think that it's all of these things are things that we are in constant need of working on in our lives. And just some of the things that you brought up are just, you just have to step back in your own self and say, man, I really could change this and make it a lot better. And I think Proverbs is a great place that tells us all of these things that help us to make us better.
Okay. Time is up. By the way, I did put the handout on Facebook. If any of you are wanting the handout, I forgot. I came to the building. I hadn't posted it. I had to run home to my computer and post it. So it's there, and I'll try to keep doing that. And thank you very much. And next week, I think we're going to talk about the positive use of words. And if not, we'll be talking about material things. Those are the two directions we're headed. We'll give you an idea. Thank you very much for being here.